Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive.
Yeah.
We love to unpack really great books, and today we have one that's been popular for a while, Think Like a Monk by Jay Shetty.
Yes.
And we actually have two sources. We have the full audiobook, and we also have a nice little concise summary video that we've gone over. And so we're going to be pulling from both of those sources today to kind of give you an overview. And hopefully by the end of this deep dive, you'll be able to kind of understand the core principles.
Right.
And think about how they might apply to you, even if you've never read the book.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think the thing that's really cool about this book is that, you don't have to actually shave your head and move to a monastery to get something out of it.
Yeah, exactly.
He starts off with this really powerful analogy of a dusty mirror.
Okay.
And how, all these external influences that we have in our lives, parents, society, media, all that, it's like layers of dust that prevent us from seeing ourselves clearly.
I get the mirror analogy, but what do you think he means by these external influences? Like, give me an example.
Well, like from the time we're kids, we're often, told what success looks like, right? Good grades, stable job, the perfect family.
Yeah.
But what if those things don't actually, light us up inside?
Right.
What if our true values are totally different?
Yeah, it's like we're being handed somebody else's map and being told, like, this is the way to go.
Exactly.
Instead of figuring out, where we really want to go.
Exactly. It's like following somebody else's map instead of charting your own course.
Yeah.
And I think, his own story really speaks to that. He left this successful career in finance to become a monk.
Yeah.
And it was in the ashram that he really, found that sense of purpose and joy that had been missing in his corporate life.
It makes you wonder how many people are out there, working these jobs or doing these things that they think they're supposed to do, that society has told them are the right things, but they're not really happy.
Yeah.
And they're not really fulfilled because they haven't taken the time to actually figure out who they are.
Yeah. And, that's where the clearing the dust part comes in.
Okay.
He acknowledges it can be uncomfortable to, confront those expectations, to kind of peel away those layers. But it's essential if we want to see our authentic reflection.
He's not sugarcoating it. He's basically saying, like, it's going to be messy.
Right.
And it's going to be challenging.
Yeah.
But, ultimately it's going to be worth it.
Absolutely. And, once we start to see ourselves more clearly, we can, begin to cultivate what he calls a monk mind.
Okay.
And he contrasts this with the monkey mind, which he describes as, restless, reactive, comparing, easily distracted.
Oh, the monkey mind. Yeah, I'm very familiar with that.
Yeah.
Always jumping from one thought to the next.
Right.
Always kind of worrying about what other people think. Never really feeling settled.
Right. Always on. But the monk mind is all about focus, intentionality, and compassion.
Okay.
So, instead of just reacting to every little thing that happens, we can choose how we respond.
So how do we make that shift? I mean, do we have to meditate for hours a day?
Well, and he offers some practical techniques. And I think, one of the interesting things that he contrasts is, the monkey mind complains, the monk mind collaborates. The monkey mind kind of sits in the passenger seat of life. The monk mind chooses to be the driver.
Ooh, I like that one.
Right.
Instead of just kind of letting life happen to you,
right,
you're taking control.
Right.
You're making conscious choices.
Exactly. And one of the ways we can do that is by, becoming aware of what he calls the cancers of the mind.
Okay.
Complaining, criticizing, comparing.
No, those are strong words.
Yeah.
Cancers of the mind.
Yeah. He argues that these negative thought patterns can be as toxic as physical diseases.
I can see that, complaining can become a habit.
Right.
And negativity can really spread and bring you down.
Absolutely. And he offers a really great tool for breaking those negative cycles.
Okay.
It's called spot, stop, swap.
Spot, stop, swap.
Yeah.
All right. Tell me more.
It's really simple. First, you spot the negative thought pattern.
Okay.
Then you consciously choose to stop it in its tracks.
Okay.
And then you swap it out for a more positive or productive thought.
So, for example, instead of just, kind of stewing in my anger, I might say, okay,
right,
I'm feeling frustrated because this situation isn't what I expected.
Right.
But what can I learn from this?
Exactly.
How can I move forward?
It's about shifting from vague negativity to constructive reflection.
Yeah.
And it ties in really well with the idea of mudita.
Mudita, right.
Which basically means finding joy in other people's successes.
I like that word. It sounds so much more eloquent than just saying don't be jealous.
Right.
It's like really celebrating other people's wins and letting their success inspire us instead of feeling threatened or inadequate. Yeah. That's a big mindset shift.
Huge mindset shift.
To go from a place of scarcity to a place of abundance where there's enough success to go around for everybody.
Exactly. And it leads really well into another interesting framework that he introduces, which is the 4 motivations that drive our actions.
Okay.
And he talks about fear, desire for success, duty, and love. He makes this point that while fear and, desire for success can be powerful motivators, they often lead to this cycle of, wanting more.
Yeah.
Never really feeling satisfied.
Yeah. It's like you hit one goal.
Right.
And then you immediately set your sights on the next one, and you never really take the time to appreciate what you've accomplished.
Right. And he argues that, finding true fulfillment comes from living a life driven by duty and love.
Okay. So that sounds beautiful in theory.
Right.
But how do we actually, how do we put that into practice? What does living a life of duty and love look like?
Well, I think, if you think about it, when we're motivated by fear, we're focused on avoiding negative outcomes.
Right.
When we're driven by desire for success, we're, constantly striving for that external validation.
Right.
But when we act from a sense of duty and love, we're doing things because they, feel inherently meaningful and right.
So it's about finding that sweet spot where our actions are aligned with our values.
Yeah.
And, our desire to serve others.
Exactly. And he acknowledges that a lot of us get stuck in what he calls the I wish trap.
Oh.
Right?
I think I might be in that trap.
Where we spend our time wishing for things to be different instead of, taking concrete steps to create the life we want.
Oh, I am so guilty of that. I wish I had more time. I wish I had more money. I wish I had more energy.
Right.
I wish.
But are you taking the steps to make those things happen?
Not always, no.
Right.
No.
And that's where I think the concept of dharma really comes in.
Sure.
He describes dharma as the intersection of passion, expertise, and usefulness. It's about identifying our unique talents and using them to contribute to the world in a meaningful way.
I'm intrigued. So how do we figure out what our dharma is?
Well, he uses this great analogy of, seeds and weeds.
Okay.
And he says, if we're pursuing goals that are driven by, ego, greed, or envy, we're essentially planting weeds.
Okay.
They might sprout up quickly,
right,
but they won't produce anything nourishing or sustainable.
That makes sense. It's like chasing after things that look shiny and appealing on the surface.
Right.
But ultimately leave us feeling empty.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, if we nurture goals that are rooted in love, compassion, and service, those are the seeds that have the potential to blossom into something truly beautiful and fulfilling.
So it's like our dharma is like the garden that we're cultivating, and the seeds that we plant are our actions and our intentions.
Exactly.
Like that.
And it's not always easy to, figure out what to plant in that garden. He shares a story about how he, initially struggled with public speaking, but when he realized that his dharma lay in, sharing the wisdom he'd learned as a monk, he pushed past that fear and found his voice.
So even if we don't know exactly what our dharma is, we can start by just experimenting with different things, stepping outside of our comfort zone.
Exactly.
And seeing what resonates with us.
Absolutely. And sometimes the things that scare us the most are the very things that we're meant to do.
That's interesting.
He talks about how we often fear the wrong things, We're afraid of failure, rejection, loss. But what we should really fear is, missing out on opportunities for growth and joy.
Right.
Because we're so attached to a particular outcome or a specific way of doing things.
So it's almost like that fear can be like a signpost pointing us toward the things that are most important to us.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that brings us to the concept of detachment. Which is often misunderstood,
Yeah. People think that it means becoming cold and indifferent.
Right, like not caring.
Yeah. But that's not what he's talking about at all.
So what does he mean by detachment?
He emphasizes that detachment is about recognizing the impermanence of everything.
Okay.
Possessions, relationships, even our own bodies.
Right.
And using that awareness to cultivate, greater freedom and inner peace.
So it sounds a little paradoxical, like how can letting go of things bring us greater freedom?
Well, he tells this great story about, a monk visiting a palace.
Okay.
And, the king's very proud of his, opulent dwelling.
Right.
He asks the monk for her opinion. And the monk, in her wisdom, simply asks, who owned this palace before you?
Okay.
And who owned it before him?
I see where this is going. It's a reminder that everything is temporary.
Exactly.
Even the things that we think are really important.
Even the most grand and impressive things.
Right.
And by clinging to things, by trying to control outcomes.
Mm-hmm. We actually create more suffering for ourselves.
Right.
Detachment isn't about not caring.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that true happiness comes from within, not from external circumstances.
So it's about shifting our focus
right.
from trying to control everything
Right.
to finding peace and acceptance in the present moment.
Precisely. And it doesn't mean we become passive or give up on our goals.
That's right.
It just means we approach life with, a sense of ease and flexibility, knowing that things are constantly changing, and that's okay.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between striving and surrendering.
Exactly. Now, all this talk about detachment and cultivating a monk mind, might make you think we need to somehow shut off our thoughts or emotions.
Right.
But that's not the case at all.
Okay, so how do we deal with, all those thoughts and feelings that inevitably come up?
He uses this amazing analogy of the mind as a chariot.
Okay.
To illustrate the importance of controlling our thoughts. The chariot represents our body.
Okay.
The horses are our senses.
Okay.
The reins are our mind, and the charioteer is our intellect.
All right, I'm visualizing it.
Yeah.
So our senses are kind of like pulling us in all these different directions.
Right.
And it's our intellect's job to kind of keep things under control.
Exactly. And the key to mastering this chariot is recognizing that we are not our minds.
Ooh.
We have thoughts, but we are not those thoughts.
Okay.
We can choose to observe them without judgment.
Right.
Without letting them dictate our actions.
So it's about creating some distance between ourselves and our thoughts, almost becoming the observer.
Right.
Instead of getting swept away by every passing thought or emotion.
Exactly. And he emphasizes that this takes practice. It's like training a muscle.
Right.
The more we practice observing our thoughts, the easier it becomes to detach from them.
Yeah.
And choose how we want to respond.
I can see how that would be really helpful for managing, negative self-talk.
Yeah.
Or, those monkey mind thoughts that tend to spiral out of control.
Exactly. And, it's important to remember that even Shetty, with all of his monk training, still faces challenges and setbacks.
He's human after all.
Exactly. He talks about how he experienced a lot of pressure and expectations when he returned to London after his time in the ashram.
Right.
He could have easily given into those external influences and reverted back to his old ways. But he chose to, double down on his commitment to the monk mindset.
So even when we face, obstacles or we feel tempted to give up, we can always choose to kind of recommit to our values.
Absolutely.
And our practice.
And one of the, core principles of the monk mindset is humility.
Okay.
And he emphasizes that true humility isn't about denying our accomplishments, but it's about recognizing the role that others played in our success and understanding that, we're all interconnected.
So it's about seeing ourselves as part of something larger than ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah.
Not as like isolated individuals trying to go it alone.
Precisely. And humility also helps us to not take things personally.
Oh, that's a big one.
Right.
Yeah.
When we detach from the need to be right or to have the last word, we avoid unnecessary conflict and drama.
It's so easy to get caught up in our own egos and feel like we're constantly being judged or attacked.
Right.
But when we can step back and see things from a more objective perspective, it's much easier to let go of that defensiveness.
Absolutely. And speaking of letting go, Shetty also talks about the importance of embracing failure as a stepping stone to success.
Okay. That's a tough one for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Myself included.
Right.
We're conditioned to fear failure, to see it as a sign of weakness.
But he argues that failure is an essential part of the learning process.
Okay.
He shares the inspiring story of Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx, who didn't let her initial setbacks, including failing the LSAT exam twice, deter her from pursuing her entrepreneurial dreams.
That's amazing.
It's a reminder that even the most successful people have faced their fair share of challenges and failures along the way.
Yeah, they didn't just, magically achieve success overnight.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that, he encourages us to view our own experiences with failure through this same lens.
Okay.
What lessons did those setbacks teach you? How did those experiences shape who you are today?
It's a powerful shift in perspective.
Right.
Instead of seeing failure as something to be ashamed of, it's an opportunity for growth and resilience.
Exactly. And this leads us to, really the cornerstone of the monk mindset, which is cultivating a service mindset. And he argues that, selfless service is the highest purpose that we can aspire to.
That's a bold statement.
Yeah.
Especially in a world that so often prioritizes individual achievement above all else.
But he makes a really compelling case that, focusing on helping others actually leads to, greater happiness, fulfillment, and connection.
So it's not just about being a good person.
Right.
It's about recognizing that we're all interconnected and that our actions have a ripple effect.
Exactly.
On the world around us.
Precisely. He shares a story about his time in the ashram where he and his fellow monks were tasked with, finding their own food and shelter in a village for 30 days with no money and no support.
Wow, that sounds intense.
Their first instinct was to worry about their own survival.
Yeah, I bet.
But as they lean into the experience, they discovered that by helping others.
Yeah.
By offering their services to people in the village, they not only, secured their own provisions, but they also fostered this sense of community and purpose.
So a powerful lesson in the transformative power of selflessness.
Exactly. And it highlights this key shift, moving from selfishness to selflessness.
Right.
The more we focus on helping others, the less we dwell on our own problems.
Makes sense.
And there's even scientific evidence to back this up.
Really? So helping others isn't just good for the soul. It's also good for our mental and physical health.
Absolutely. Studies have shown that, helping others releases endorphins, reduces stress, and even boosts our immune system.
So it's a win-win all around.
Exactly. And, he emphasizes that we don't have to become monks.
Right.
Or move to a remote village
to
experience these benefits.
Right.
Even small acts of service can make a big difference.
Like holding the door open for someone.
Exactly.
Or, giving a genuine compliment to somebody who needs it.
Right.
Or volunteering our time.
It's about extending our radius of care to include more people in our circle of compassion.
Okay, I'm feeling inspired, but I'm also wondering, how do we actually start incorporating these monk mindset principles into our daily lives?
Yeah.
Are there specific practices that we can try?
Absolutely. He offers some really practical tools and techniques that we can start using right away.
Okay, let's get tactical.
Right.
All right, so give us some of those tactical tips. What are some things that Shetty actually recommends for putting this monk mindset into practice?
Well, one of the simplest and yet most powerful practices is mindful breathing.
Mindful breathing.
It's something that we do all the time without even thinking, but bringing awareness to it, even for just a few minutes a day can make a huge difference.
I've heard of mindful breathing, but I've always been a little intimidated by it. Am I doing it right? Do I have to sit in a certain way or chant a mantra or something?
No, he keeps it really simple. He just suggests, find a comfortable position.
Okay.
Close your eyes, focus on the sensation of your breath as it enters and leaves your body.
That's it.
That's it.
No special cushions or incense required.
Nope. It's about finding those little moments of stillness wherever you are. And it's funny, he says, when your mind wanders and it will just gently guide it back to your breath without judgment.
Okay.
He compares it to training a puppy.
I love that analogy.
Right.
So it's not about forcing our minds to be quiet.
Right.
But it's about gently redirecting them.
Exactly. It's a practice, not a perfection.
Okay.
And speaking of practice, he also recommends incorporating visualization into our routine.
Okay.
Taking a few minutes each morning to visualize our ideal day.
Ooh, I like this one. So we're talking picturing myself feeling calm and productive, having positive interactions with people.
Exactly.
Feeling good overall.
Exactly. It's about setting an intention for the day. Creating that mental blueprint for the kind of energy we want to bring into the world.
And I imagine that this can be helpful for overcoming negativity too. If we're visualizing a positive outcome, it's harder for those, cancers of the mind to take hold.
Absolutely. And you know what else he recommends for cultivating focus and energy?
What's that?
Chanting
mantras.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I know it might sound a little out there, but he explains, the vibrations and the rhythms of chanting can have a profound effect on our mental and emotional state.
I could see that being very calming and centering, almost like listening to soothing music.
Right.
Yeah.
And there are tons of resources available if you're interested in trying it out. You don't need to be an expert or anything.
So we've got mindful breathing visualization, chanting, All great tools for kind of cultivating that monk mindset.
Absolutely.
Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I think, the biggest takeaway is that you don't need to become a monk or live in a monastery to benefit from these principles.
Right. It's about taking these small, intentional steps
Yeah.
and incorporating them into our daily lives.
Absolutely.
And remembering that even small shifts in our thinking and behavior can have that ripple effect.
Mm-hmm.
Not just for ourselves, but for the world around us.
Exactly. And, as we've been talking about all this, I've been thinking about that idea of the I wish trap that he talks about. It's so easy to get caught up in wishing things were different.
Right.
But maybe instead of saying I wish, we can start asking ourselves, what's one small step I can take today to move closer to the life I want to create?
I love that, turning those wishes into actionable steps.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Think Like a Monk, I want to challenge our listeners to identify one small action they can take today to bring a little bit more of that monk mindset into their lives. Maybe it's practicing mindful breathing for 5 minutes before bed. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's visualizing your ideal day. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's choosing to swap out a negative thought for a positive one. Whatever it is, just take that first step.
Remember, every journey begins with a single step.
That's right.
And even the smallest actions, when done consistently and with intention, can have a profound impact.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep seeking, keep learning, and keep thinking like a monk.